Hello and welcome to this interview as part of Restaurant and Bar Design Week. I'm Harry McKinley and I'm joined by Dan Flannery, MD of Edition Hotels. So what is there about Edition Hotels that I can tell you that you don't already know? Well, probably not a lot, but let's have a quick refresh anyway. Launched in 2010, the brand is the brainchild of hotel virtuoso Ian Schrager. It's a partnership with Marriott International, and from a first location in Hawaii, is rapidly becoming a mainstay of travel destinations around the globe, with a packed pipeline of upcoming openings. As for the concept, well, Edition Hotels are billed as microcosms of the world's top cities. Luxury, yes, but also a bit sexy and with fantastic public spaces at their heart. Restaurants and bars that appeal just as much to locals as they do to visitors. So I'd like to dive right in, Dan, if I may. I don't want the doom and gloom of COVID to steer our conversation too much, but I do think we have to address the fact that these are extraordinary times, challenging times. So how has the past year and a half been for Edition, and perhaps more importantly, how has it affected the future trajectory of the brand? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, well, good morning. First of all, thank you for having me on. I'm Dan, as you mentioned, and it's been quite a year and a half here, as most people know, quite a roller coaster. So we had 10 hotels that were open as we went into the front end of the pandemic, and we're one of 30 brands that Marriott operates around the world. And like the other 30 brands, I mean, we saw either forced complete shutdowns of hotels, either mandated by governments, or just business dropping to the point where we needed to shut down to protect the owners' interests. And so out of those 10, we shut down all except 3 of those, and lost about 90% of our system-wide revenue, and consequently really had to furlough and lay off almost our entire teams to survive and get through this. And the same uncertainty everyone else had, that we didn't know how long this was going to go on. So as this kind of started to play out, we have a pretty interesting perspective because we have 2 hotels in China. We opened one in Japan in the middle of the pandemic, which I'll talk about in a second. We have 4 hotels in Europe. We have 4 in the US. So we have an interesting perspective around the globe, from China, where, was the kind of the first wave of this, and watching the recoveries as they kind of went through various continents, and even just watching it flow through the US at different paces was interesting. But we opened Tokyo in September, right in the kind of middle of the pandemic, as it was almost finished and the owners wanted to get it open, and there was still some question about whether the Olympics, when the Olympics would take place, and so we wanted to be prepared. We didn't open it fully, but we had 11 hotels, and we gradually, as things started picking up momentum in this year, and at the end of the first quarter, we started opening plans for the rest of them, and we reopened everything by June 1st. So what's really interesting for me is 2 things. One is that we didn't lose any flags this time around. In the Great Recession, really wiped out the pipeline because a lot of owners couldn't get financing back then. So, we were kind of holding our breath to see whether we would lose any assets and hotels that we were so proud of and worked so hard to get open, and we have not, thankfully. The second thing is just how as fast as business dropped, it recovered even faster. As things are coming back here, everybody that I speak to in the industry is saying, boy, we couldn't get rid of people fast enough to survive a year and a half ago, and we can't find them fast enough to get reopened and keep up with the business that we're doing now. So, that and the pipeline starting to take off again. So it's turned around very, very rapidly.
Are you conscious of the fact that different regions are recovering at slightly different rates? I'm conscious of the fact that I'm here in the UK, for example, and certainly our vaccination program is going quite smoothly, but other countries are doing much worse, and other countries are actually doing much better. So is that something that you are considering as you think about that pipeline, just considering it is so international?
It is, and it's interesting dynamics that are different in every part of the world or every country based on what's going on there. First of all, leisure is really leading the recovery in a very big way. So people want to get out and travel. They want to go out to restaurants and bars. They've been kind of cooped up for long enough here that they want to get back. So group is starting to show some signs of life. Business travel is coming along slowly, but leisure is very, very, very strong. And you look at kind of what drives It's a big reason that resorts are that much busier than city hotels. So urban hotels have been the slowest to recover for various reasons. But you look at a resort that we have in Sanya, China, the whole country of China, the borders are closed. They can't travel anywhere. So there's not that many resort destinations in China for the amount of population that you have there. And they can't travel. And so there's still very affluent, wealthy Chinese travelers that, have limited options. And we not only had a record year in Sanya last year, this year we'll do 2.5 times what we budgeted for revenue and profit in that hotel. Similarly, Bodrum, Turkey, 2019 was a record year in Bodrum for us in the resort. This month, the general manager told me that they're doing 4 times the volume in the restaurants and bars that they did last year at the same time in that hotel. So huge demand in resort destinations, and there's all kinds of different dynamics, right? New York will be impacted by when Broadway's reopened, among other things. It relies on international travel more than markets like Miami for us, maybe, or West Hollywood. When those things happen in New York, we'll recover faster. Our hotels in Europe, our London hotel was 55% of our business there traditionally is from the United States, and Barcelona is 65%. So until those borders open, for U.S. travel and people really start booking again and traveling more frequently, that recovery will be a little bit slow in coming around. So just things that we never considered, looking market by market and watching, what's affecting and, it's creating winners and losers, I guess.
Perhaps the wider question then is, do you think that travel and hospitality are permanently changed? Is how we travel permanently changed? Is what we look for from travel experiences permanently changed?
Yeah, I've been saying from the beginning that things always get back to normal, right? Or you think about people who've been eating out in restaurants for, 2.5 centuries and survived world wars and pandemics and, all kinds of things that happened, across the years. And people still love to go out and dine and eat and socialize and go to bars for the same reason. We're very social beings and people crave that kind of interaction. So it must make for good reading, the naysayers to kind of print a lot of gloom and doom. Things will never be the same. We saw the same thing after 9/11 in New York City. New York will never be the same. Downtown will never be the same. The stock exchange is going to move out of New York City. And it always comes back, right? It just always bounces back. And we're seeing that again. So, will there be some lingering, changes in behavior or maybe technology advances that developed with this contactless payment? Or will more people use mobile check-in? Probably, but some people in hotels still like to go to the front desk to see a human being and maybe talk myself into a nicer room assignment. So most of it is going to return to normal.
Fantastic. So let's leave COVID behind, as we all want to anyway. And before we delve a bit deeper into F&B at Edition, and that's food and beverage for non-industry folks, I want to get a sense of how you see its role. So my first experience with an Edition hotel was not staying overnight, but grabbing a bite to eat at Berners Tavern in London. Being based in the UK, I couldn't count the number of work meetings that I've had at the lobby bar next door. I've obviously stayed at various properties since, but are you conscious that for many people, these public areas, these bars and restaurants, constitute their sole connection to the Edition brand? And what does that say to you?
Yeah, it is... when we think about not just food and beverage, but specifically restaurants and bars, the public retail spaces for food and beverage, that's really what we look to create the personality of the hotel. That's what people see. That's what creates the energy. That's what draws people in and that people know locally. And travelers feel comfortable if they're in a place that the locals seem to like, because I feel like I'm in the center of things and there must be something here because they know better, they live here. So creating restaurants and bars that create that energy and buzz and develop that local appeal is where you get the energy of a hotel. I had a restaurant architect tell me once that the reason people design bars at the front of restaurants is that bars were where all the action was, and it would grab people's attention when you're walking by saying, wow, this place is busy, it looks fun, this is why I'm going to go in here. Not just to have a drink before going into a restaurant. And I think similarly, restaurants and bars do that for hotels. It creates that kind of gravitational pull for the public and for locals.
So my next question is a little bit controversial with some hotel groups, and then it also depends who you ask within those hotel groups. But which is more important, rooms or public spaces?
It'll sound like a cop-out answer in this, but it really is both, right? You can't have one without the other. It's like asking a sports team, is it more important to play offense or defense, right? I think they're important for different reasons. People stay in a hotel obviously to sleep in a bed and take a shower, and the room side of the business is the most profitable, and it's why developers are building these hotels for those returns that you get on the room side. But if you want to get people repeat guests and you want to get people talking about your hotel in the press and in social media, that takes place through the restaurant and bar business. When we open a new hotel, people maybe write about the guest room design once, right when you open, and it's usually design and architectural publications that will cover kind of the inspiration of the guest room design. But they write about what's happening in the restaurants and bars every day. People post social media postings about what's happening in restaurants and bars, every day. Thousands and thousands of times. And some of them, if they're really high profile, we had one event at the New York edition years ago that is in the billions and billions of retweets because it was a birthday dinner for Rihanna with, kind of a who's list that attended the event. And she went out and did a live performance of a new single out on 24th Street after the dinner. And people are still talking about that and reposting some of those pictures and stories and events today. So that doesn't happen from the guest rooms. That doesn't create the story and the buzz. It is restaurants and bars.
But ultimately, would people stay in those rooms if it wasn't for the restaurants and bars?
It's in lifestyle hotels, you really need great restaurants and bars. In luxury, you need to offer all the services and amenities that people expect. So beyond, restaurants and bars, turn down service and great amenities and spas and concierges and some of those. But it's part of the amenities and services that guests expect when they're traveling in luxury. They don't want to have to go out somewhere to grab a drink or get something. They expect, an interesting, well-stocked mini bar. All those things are part of kind of a luxury traveler. But in lifestyle hotels, again, they're where you create the personality of the hotel. You could go into a classic luxury hotel, and if it's quiet and serene and peaceful and there's a harpist playing in the corner, that's fine, because it may work very well to create a very serene, relaxing environment. But people who choose to stay in lifestyle hotels are looking for some energy.
Do you consider Edition to be a disruptor? And if so, how can Edition continue to disrupt? I mean, there almost isn't a hotel group going now that doesn't place a huge emphasis on its bars, restaurants, and other public spaces. And of course, there's some really innovative things happening there.
Look, there are definitely some hotels that do a really good job on the food and beverage business, but not a lot. I think overwhelmingly you see that in our business, rooms are the best margins. Banquets is probably second. Catering events, bars are probably third, and then restaurants are low margin, and many markets lose money. And it also is a business that changes quite much more frequently and evolves, styles and tastes and different types of foods and cocktail programs and wines. They evolve over time. So it takes a lot more work to stay up on the restaurant bar business, and it's a lower return. So consequently, I think you've seen hotels that just decide to outsource it or try not to do it, or if they had multiple restaurant bar events, turn them into meeting space because it's easier to sell it and use it that way. It's a priority focus for us. One of the things that excited me about starting Edition with Ian Schrager back in 2008 was when I joined initially, is that my background was in restaurants and bars. The first 14 years of my career, all I did was work in restaurants and bars, from bussing tables and waiting tables and moving up into management positions. And I loved it. And I started seeing our industry somewhat turn their back on that business. which was disappointing. And to hear Ian say, that we need a deep commitment to doing this well, because it's part of the whole experience. It's an important part of the whole experience. It may be the most important part of the whole experience from a social standpoint, and that it would be a priority for us and something that we would be committed to doing very well. So that was refreshing for me to hear. As far as being a disruptor, I think that more and more hotels are becoming more lifestyle. You go into hotels, you don't hear the classical music in the elevators anymore. You hear more contemporary music, and uniform styles have changed and design has changed a little bit. So there's no question that the whole industry's paid attention and said, everybody wants to be more lifestyle or say they're lifestyle. The big difference is that most of really all of the global lifestyle brands, you wouldn't necessarily put in that top tier of luxury. And so we set out to be a luxury lifestyle brand, which is different. And so what that means is, on the room side, we want to appeal to that unique segment of travelers that are luxury travelers and pay higher rates and book in suites. And in order to do that, you need to have services and amenities that meet their expectations. But in design and style and in the public spaces, really create that lifestyle, what people used to call boutique kind of buzz and energy. And so I think we consider ourselves the first that really have done that on a global basis, and are continuing to with the development that we have now.
It is interesting to hear you talk about how important that luxury tag is to Edition's DNA. But it does pose the question then of exactly what luxury means to Edition and how that's reflected in the F&B.
Yeah, first of all, luxury is an overused term. Everybody says, it's a luxury car, a luxury, home builder, luxury hotels, luxury, materials. And I think that the sense is that the minute you say you're luxury, people will pay more money for your product and it's more upscale. In our business, though, it really is different guests, different consumers. And I don't mean that just in terms of a demographic standpoint of, how much money they make or that they're CEOs of companies or what have you. They really come from different segments. They book differently. And, when my first general manager's job in the hotel business was at a full service hotel. And the segments that we looked at were negotiated business travel accounts that were big for us, group business that was big for us, business that was linked to or driven by the loyalty program that people wanted points when they stayed in the hotel, packages, then the beginning of OTAs, back in the late 90s, being an important segment. Then I moved over to luxury over 20 years ago, and really opened my eyes to a whole three different primary segments of travelers who spend a lot more money, book suites, and quite honestly are a lot more demanding about what kind of services they expect. The first, at the Riga, was a big entertainment hotel. So the entertainment industry is not just, actors and singers, but also athletes and sports teams. And there's a couple of different segments of that business. You can get individual travelers who are booking suites, and that can be very lucrative, and people can pay thousands and tens of thousands of dollars a night for a suite in a hotel. But then there's also touring bands, there's press junkets, there's sports teams. So different segments there that pay a lot more and buy up into the suite business in luxury hotels if you have the right services and amenities. You can't, the minute you have a band in-house and you don't have 24-hour room service, you won't get that band back again. As a matter of fact, you won't get it when they ask if you don't do that. So the other two segments are diplomatic business, this whole world of embassy business and royals and people that buy suites and out of very wealthy parts of the world that often travel with huge entourages, and the demands they put on the hotel are pretty amazing. I had I won't tell you what country because I can't reveal who it was, but had the first lady of a country that wanted a presidential suite, a royal suite they called it, but was afraid of heights, wanted it on a low floor, and wondered whether we could build one out with 10 days notice. And so we literally had to knock a couple of rooms down, close other floors so that we could borrow furniture and artwork and chandeliers to create a low floor royal suite for this lady, because it's very wealthy, it's a very lucrative business. So that certainly doesn't exist in full service. And then the third is the travel industry segment. And you would think that as people, more and more people like us who, when we travel, go on Expedia or Booking.com or book that way, then you go out to Virtuoso Travel Week in August in Las Vegas. The first time I was there, I walked in and realized there's 6,500 luxury travel agents in that ballroom conducting one-on-one interviews. And you realize how many really affluent travelers still use travel agents and pay them a fee, or we pay commissions because they have very specific requirements, and they want somebody handling that business for them. They want somebody coordinating their flights and their car pickups and transfers and dinner reservations, and somebody that can really advise them on what's going on in that destination that they should go see or do, and people that have access. So those three segments, it really is different. It's not just getting people to pay more for the same product because you say you're luxury or you put nicer materials and fabrics and amenities in the guest room. It's a different consumer and a different buying process.
But thinking specifically about the bar and restaurant offer, how does Edition define that luxury sensibility? What does that actually mean beyond just a price point? Because it's not necessarily that Edition is fine dining.
Yeah, it depends on the destination. I think oftentimes you have to keep in consideration a need for privacy and a need for normalcy. So if you have a celebrity guest in a restaurant and there's not a place to put them that is a little bit more private, and they're going to have people, taking pictures of them or walking by or asking for autographs or asking them to stand up and take a picture with them, and that's not the experience that they want. They're in most cases looking for protection and privacy and kind of controlling some of the craziness that can come with paparazzi. So the number of people who will book out, we have a nightclub in Miami called Basement that is adjacent to a bowling alley. Bowling alley is actually part of the bar at one end, and ice skating rink off to the side. And the number of people who will just say, hey, we want to rent out the bowling alley, for our whole party for the night, to have some privacy, have a social event with their friends, but not be in a fishbowl. So designing spaces that you can use in multiple ways that are great for the public, but also, easy to buy out and have some level of privacy. So a lot of things to take into consideration.
On the design front, then, how do you straddle the line between creating public spaces that speak to the location while also developing some kind of consistent, recognizable design vernacular? Is it important to you, for example, that people know right away that they're in an Edition hotel?
In a subtle way, right? So we have certain signature elements or style. We're very much about simplicity in design, right? Not going over the top with patterns or too many competing ideas that, kind of make your head spin. Ian's one of his favorite phrases, I think, is Leonardo da Vinci, I believe, that said, simplicity is the ultimate luxury. I think that's who said it. So there is a simplicity in a style with us, but there are some signature elements, right? In the guest room, we use some version of the throw on the beds that is somewhat of a tell, or you walk into our lobbies and you have the custom Labo scent that you can smell, and most of them we have a kind of a different colored pool table and somewhere in the lobby in the public space. So there are elements like that would signal in a subtle way, hey, this is an addition. But then in addition to that, I think the things that we focus on doing particularly well with experts are the architectural lighting. Really, really well done in public spaces, very, very important to us. Interior and exterior landscaping with, the best landscape architects, and then really top quality sound design. We have, even in public spaces, we use sound design companies that do rock concerts, Michael Jackson, Rolling Stones, Black Eyed Peas. So just doing those elements particularly well, I think is an indicator for people that this feels like Edition.
On the issue of localization, then, how far do you actually push that? I mean, I wrote a piece recently, for example, on the new Edition in Tokyo, and it was interesting that Ian said he didn't want the design to feel like some pastiche of Japan. So where do you draw that line in terms of just how much you localize the design?
They should, but not not screaming it in your face, right? So you mentioned Tokyo. There are elements of that design that are inspired by the lines of or the materials in a Buddhist temple, but you wouldn't walk into that lobby and say, "Oh, wow, that's a Buddhist temple," right? So it's not in a cartoonish way that is just screaming at you. Just some real subtleties, and there's a great emphasis with Ian and the team on really spectacular architecture, respecting not only the city that you're in and the culture, but also the environment and what's around you. So in Tokyo, the two restaurants overlook this beautiful Tokyo Tower that you see it at night is just spectacular to look at. Or Bodrum is very much oriented down 256 steps from the lobby to the bay to the agency there. Hotels like that. Shanghai is situated right along the Bund, so you have this spectacular view up and down the Bund and over to Pudong. That you have this great look over Shanghai. So kind of respecting what's around you, and then having subtle influences in the architecture and design that would feel like it's appropriate for that space, but that's genuine and authentic and not a knockoff of something somebody else has done already.
Have you considered bringing more of that design in-house, or is the collaboration with designers something that you think is crucial to Edition's DNA? I mean, as an example, you recently worked with Kengo Kuma, of course, on that just opened Toranomon property in Tokyo. So we're talking about some pretty heavyweight design names. Is that sense of collaboration something that's quite important?
We think so. We'll often bring, collaborators in and work with, when we work with public relations, we'll have an international agency, we'll have a national agency in some countries, we'll have a local agency, and sometimes on top of that, we'll have a restaurant and bar agency. So, getting that collaboration, getting different ideas, we've worked with different chefs in different locations so that you get good ideas and interesting points of view. So that collaboration on the design side is certainly fundamental to putting everyone's head together and saying, how do we do something interesting here that's going to make people feel good? It's going to be a great experience.
So going back to this idea of localization in terms of concept and delivery, then, by which I mean the overall experience, the menu development, how important do you think it is there? And where do you think that's been most successful in the group? Is there a particular project or projects, for example, where you just think, man, we really nailed it there in terms of speaking to the location?
I'm biased, right? They're all somewhat our children here. So I think they're all special in different ways. We have hotels like Shanghai that are 149 guest rooms and 9 food and beverage outlets. So just completely disproportionate. We have others that are Barcelona that are 100 rooms and 1 restaurant and a bar and a roof bar, right? So depending on what space you have in the building to work with determines what the outcome is. But the things I mentioned, I think the style, respecting the terrain and the what's around you is certainly important. Working off of whatever exists with the existing architecture, if it's a historic building, which is a unique challenge, right? You look at what we did with Shanghai; it was at the site of the first power company ever in Shanghai, and so old historic building. Or London was the Berners Hotel, and just great interior architecture, as in that hotel, and Berners Tavern restaurant and lobby bar. Or the New York edition being in the old clock tower building. So I think you have a unique opportunity when you're in those old historic buildings. We'll do more of those with Rome, Milan, and Madrid. That'll be similar style. And then sometimes you have hotels like Toranomon that are give you an opportunity to do a new ground up build and do something different. So it gives you a different palette to work off of and different assets to kind of take advantage of. But the goal is always, no matter what you do, to elicit a reaction from people, not just people say, okay, well, it's Instagram moments and they take pictures in the hotel and tell you that it's beautiful. But quick story in Toronto, we opened in September of the pandemic, and we had to, Ian's team had to direct the styling without being able to get into the country. And my team had to run the training with a 12-hour time difference, staying up all night, directing it virtually without being able to get into the country as well. So when it came time for the press conference, Normally we would go, and Ian would do the press conference, and often at times in the past he would do it with Arnie Sorensen, who passed away earlier this year, our old CEO. And then we would have our teams do the press tours and take them around, give them tours of the space, and it gave us an opportunity to watch their reactions, see what they were reacting to, hear what they were saying, and we couldn't do that in Tokyo. So we got a note from the owner the next morning. She was so excited because Ian did the press conference virtually, and then our local team took the press on tours, and she said that when they walked into two of the venues, there's a restaurant called the Jade Room that we're doing with a chef from London, actually from your hometown, Tom Akins, is doing the food there for us. Beautiful space with this outdoor terrace, and when they walked in, she said you could hear them gasp, like the reporters just gasped, not saying, "Wow, this is nice, it's beautiful, thank you very much." And then she said when they walked into the Gold Bar on the street level, she said they just erupted into applause. And so that's the goal, right? We want to elicit that kind of emotion and reaction from people when they see and feel the space.
Well, I think most people would be happy with a round of applause. But looking at some of these cities that are coming up then, the likes of Rome, how important is it that you look at what's already there? Because, of course, they have very established culinary scenes. So is it important that you deliver something new?
You have to go study the market and see what's there. And it's different based on where you go. So in some destinations, they are really open and respond to new concepts coming from outside the country. I won't tell you which one yet because we didn't announce this, but one of the urban projects that we're doing that's not in Mexico is we're bringing in a Michelin star Mexican chef to do the restaurant in that location, which wouldn't work in every city, right? In Barcelona, people expect some Spanish tapas influence on the food in most cases. When we go to Rome, not only is it most hotels do Italian restaurants, but they do Roman restaurants. So there are some other places, Abu Dhabi, you could do just about anything. So it's really important to understand what the locals are responding to and where are they going as we're putting together our plans and our options for cuisine and restaurant concepts.
Is there an edition formula? By which I mean, do you think edition works or could work everywhere? I mean, certainly there's a massive expansion, but we're talking about community and personality and bringing locals into those spaces. And there's a huge difference between a Reykjavik and a Tokyo or an Abu Dhabi and a West Hollywood. Totally different cities, totally different people.
It is. I mean, it's probably not going to work everywhere, right? So luxury hotels are more expensive to build. And so you've got to, in order to get a return that works, you've got to have pricing power in that market, right? So you can't go into third tier cities that are not driving, sweet business and high rates and expect that formula to work. But I will say, I believe that we are seeing appeal in secondary cities, and one of the most exciting projects will open within the next year is in Tampa. And there's nothing like this in Tampa. And I think because of the fact that we have the normal returns that you get out of on the hotel side and could drive rates, we have the added benefit that traditional luxury hotels maybe don't, that we also run a secondary business and source of profitability. It's almost like running a hotel and running a restaurant and bar business. So bringing in those returns in addition to what you do on the hotel side can make addition, I believe, work in more cities around the world than maybe some classic traditional luxury brands could.
Well, I'm ultra curious as to where this Mexican chef is going, and I know you're not going to tell me, but there is a slate of new openings on the horizon that we do know about. Which are you most excited about?
All of them for different reasons. I think some, hotels like Tampa that I mentioned, or Reykjavik in Iceland, just because there's nothing like that. There are very few cities in the world that you can travel to and say there's really no luxury business, or no, in the case of Reykjavik, almost no branded hotels there. So the number of people who are inquiring about Reykjavik to go there, because they're just things that you can't see or do anywhere else in the world. You can go up for the best salmon fishing in the world. You can go up to see the Northern Lights. You can go to a glacier. And now in a 45-minute drive, you can get to the base of a mountain and hike up and see a volcano erupting live and get, I got close enough to it that when it was erupting, you could feel the heat on your face, coming across the valley. So it's just a unique destination that there haven't been then hotels that gave people the opportunity to experience that, and even big groups to do incentive meetings there and different types of things that we'll do there. So certainly locations like that, because there's just nothing like that in the town. And then there are other cities like Rome and Madrid and Milan, where there are already there's plenty of great hotels there already, but we're going to go in and do something different and unique, and that's always fun. When we went into Sanya, China, it's the southernmost part of this, it's down by the South China Sea, so southernmost part of the country, in a market that you talk about the owner there, Chairman Chan, being a real visionary. Here's a country and a market that was 97% Chinese business, over 50% wholesale market, which is not our normal kind of wheelhouse, in a market that had never heard of Edition, and quite honestly had probably never heard of Studio 54 or Ian Traeger or any of that story to tell. But he believed that they liked brands, and that the young, affluent Chinese travelers were looking for something much more stylish and different than what their parents were looking for. We opened that hotel in 2016, and it took off. So going into new markets like that and trying something that they've never seen before, and dealing with the naysayers that say, well, this will never work. This market's more traditional and they're looking for more of the same of what they have already, is a fun challenge as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dan. Those listening can find Edition on Instagram at Edition Hotels. They can find me on Instagram at Harry McKinley, and they can find the Restaurant and Bar Design Awards at Restaurant and Bar Design Awards, as well as lots of other content at www.restaurantandbardesignAwards.com. So do check out our other talks, and for now, thanks for listening.